Egypt. Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak had long been a U.S. ally and had kept the radical Muslim Brotherhood out of power for more than 40 years prior to Obama's intervention. The president suddenly insisted at the beginning of February 2011 that a transition to democratic government in Egypt must be meaningful, it must be peaceful, and it must begin now. With that absurd statement, the idea that transitions of power in the Middle East could be peaceful and could result in democratic governments, Obama revealed one of two things. Either he and his ivory tower advisers are hopelessly naive regarding what's going on, or he is secretly on the side of Muslim radicals and believes that the overthrow of our allies will hasten their rise to power. Less than 2 weeks after Obama made his mincing declaration that Mubarak must go, his Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, claimed that the Muslim Brotherhood was largely secular. Within hours, the administration refuted Clapper's absurd claim, reinforcing the fact that its foreign policy is chaotic at best, subversive at worst. In addition to revealing the administration's ineptitude, its positions with regard to Egypt help reveal where Obama really stands, firmly against a strong ally of the United States and Israel. While the Mubarak regime was dictatorial, it did maintain order in the streets and suppress Islamist radicals. It also maintained peace with Israel. Within a matter of weeks, Mubarak stepped down. As the left-wing press and the Obama administration were congratulating themselves on ousting Mubarak, and the Muslim Brotherhood was moving toward taking over Egypt, the Egyptian military stepped in and took charge. If you didn't see what was coming, let me explain it to you. As I told you in the previous chapter, Obama is an avowed anti-Semite. He's pro-Muslim, anti-Judaism. He's also anti-Christian, and his ongoing attack on Christianity is not confined to the United States. His support of the ouster of Mubarak, under whom Coptic Christians were allowed to worship in peace, has led to the rise of violence toward Christians by Muslims. In October 2011, 26 Coptic Christians were killed, and hundreds more wounded in attacks by the Egyptian military. The attack occurred as Christian groups marched through Cairo in protest against the burnings of their churches. Egyptian Muslims pelted them with rocks as they moved along, and by the time they had reached their destination at a radio and TV broadcasting facility, the army started shooting into the crowd and trying to run over the protesters with their vehicles. Observers predicted that the event would cause a massive emigration of Christians from Egypt. Obama's response left me disgusted. In the wake of the murder of more than 24 unarmed Christians by the Egyptian military, the president called on Christians to show restraint. How were they supposed to do that? By allowing more of their brethren to be murdered by the military? The president continued, "Now is the time for restraint on all sides, so that Egyptians can move forward together to forge a strong and united Egypt." The loss of life was tragic, but Christians need to put it behind them? No international sanction against the Egyptian military? No condemnation of an obvious hate crime against Christians? No withdrawing of U.S. foreign aid from Egypt? Don't tell me Obama didn't know something like this would happen. After Mubarak's ouster, the Egyptian military demonstrated that it was incapable of maintaining order. Reports began to emerge out of Egypt that indicated there were no police on the streets in Cairo and other cities. Coptic Christians, who make up about 10% of Egypt's population, were clashing with Muslims, and the result was extensive casualties. Ambulances were nowhere to be seen, and the wounded were transported to medical facilities in garbage trucks. Roadblocks were frequently set up, not by the government but by lawless thugs, who stopped traffic and stole valuables from the occupants of the automobiles they detained. Without a functioning police force, vigilante groups sprang up, taking the law into their own hands. Reports also surfaced that the Egyptian army was partnering with the Muslim Brotherhood to perform virginity tests on women who protested in Tahrir Square. So much for Obama's insistence that the transition must be peaceful. So much for a pro-Israel, anti-Muslim Brotherhood Egypt as an ally of the United States. Egypt is under military rule with the ouster of Mubarak. Although there remain deep divisions between Islamists and those who favor a secular government, the overwhelming likelihood is that the Islamist Muslim Brotherhood will prevail. With Mubarak gone, the transition to either a military government or one founded on Islamic law is guaranteed. Libya. When the popular revolt against Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi began, Obama didn't know what to do. Many of his strongest supporters, like Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan and race hustler the Reverend Al Sharpton, were actually in favor of the dictator, and Obama had made nice to the dictator from his first days in office. It is time for a savage history lesson, which includes the important points that the mainstream media leave out. Abdelbasit al-Megrahi was a colonel in Libya's intelligence service when he approved the bombing of a packed passenger jet, Pan Am 103. It exploded over Lockerbie, Scotland in 1988, killing all 270 people on board. Mothers, babies, tourists, students, and 2 retirees coming back from a trip that they had dreamed about for a lifetime. Ultimately, Libya turned over the bomber. He was tried in a British court and jailed for life. The military intervention in Libya had everything to do with Europe's need to keep Libyan oil flowing, and nothing to do with defending Libyan citizens or promoting democracy. Have you forgotten Britain's and Scotland's deal with Libya? The one that led to Megrahi's release? British intelligence had been in bed with the Libyan dictator throughout Prime Minister Tony Blair's tenure in office. The Blair government had offered British special forces to assist in training Gaddafi's Khamis Brigade, the brutal and vicious Libyan security force. They'd also disclosed to Gaddafi how one of their secret forces operated. When it came to Megrahi, though, Britain caved. Gaddafi threatened dire consequences, including harassing British nationals and canceling lucrative oil contracts with British companies BP and Shell, and suspending cooperation with British intelligence if Megrahi was not freed and returned to his homeland. The Obama administration played a role in that, too. It secretly approved the release of supposedly terminally ill Megrahi. They said Megrahi was dying and asked if he could spend his last few moments of life with his family. A Scottish doctor played along. Of course, the families of the Lockerbie victims would have liked a few more moments with their loved ones before they died in a plane crash at Megrahi's hands. The real reason Megrahi was released was so that oil giant BP could negotiate a contract with Libya. With Obama's approval secretly delivered through the U.S. ambassador in London, Megrahi was flown home. Cheering crowds in Libya greeted his plane like he had just returned from landing on the moon or winning the World Series. As for the terminally ill Megrahi, he was still alive almost 2 years later. The Libyans had tricked Obama. Maybe he wanted to be tricked. Still, Obama treated Gaddafi as a friend. In Libya, the Transnational National Council, TNC, has gained some control as the governing body of Libya and has been recognized by the U.S. and other European countries. The Muslim Brotherhood, banned by Gaddafi, would be eligible to participate in a government formed by the TNC. The U.S. went along, recognizing the legitimacy of the Brotherhood in Egypt in July 2011.